You may have noticed there's a gardening revolution going on. Thousands of lawnmowers have stayed in their sheds this month, and nature is coming out to play. This is part of a growing interest in a more wildlife-friendly approach to gardening and a move away from straight lines and domination. It's not just about managing our gardens, if we're lucky enough to have them. It's about nurturing connection, and its power goes way beyond the garden gate. I've spent the last 10 years promoting biodiversity in gardens and public spaces and evangelising for nature, speaking at garden shows, festivals, events up and down the country. I work with gardeners, community groups, councils and schools giving practical advice on what seeds to sow in specific locations. And my overriding message is to grow lots of seeds for insects. It's very simple, and though it doesn't always appear to be at the cutting edge of environmental activism, no superglue involved, I think, it's very accessible. It's a very accessible step towards restoring the structures that support the web of life. Flowers are easy to get going. They're lovely for us, of course, and they're also essential to the invertebrate population, providing them with forage and insect and habitat. Any increase in insect populations, even on a local scale, will have a knock-on effect up the food chain, benefiting birds, amphibians and mammals. For me, it all starts with a handful of flower seeds. Sowing seeds is like casting a spell, beyond magical, and I'm still in awe at how a tiny seed can produce something so beautiful and extraordinary. In the right conditions, they germinate very quickly, and the transformation can be astounding. A community of plants that flowers in succession over several months will provide a continuum of nectar and pollen for insects, as well as delight and anticipation as new flowers appear in waves like little fireworks. As gardeners, or even would-be gardeners, we have an opportunity to do something brilliant. With an estimated 22 million gardens in the UK, we have space equivalent to 4.5 times the size of all our nature reserves put together. Whether you have a large garden or a window box, you can create an oasis for insects and other wildlife. The love of gardening and even the basic skills are gifts to be shared. Beyond our own gardens, in our wider surroundings, the time is ripe for us to consider the areas that are crying out to be gardened. We need to pay attention to what is thriving and what is not, and to respond to what these spaces are asking of us, what it is they need in order to flourish. I started to get really interested in wildlife gardening in 2010 when I read the Living Planet report, a science-based analysis of the health of our planet and the impact of human activity. And to my astonishment, learned that more than half the world's wildlife had disappeared in my lifetime. I'm sad to say there's been no let-up in the loss of biodiversity in the UK. From time to time, without much fanfare, new reports pop up highlighting our collective failure to halt the losses, challenging our capacity for hope. Just this week, we've seen the Bugs Matter survey, led by the charity BugLife and the Kent Wildlife Trust. The report shows a decline of almost 60% in less than 20 years, with an average decline now of 34% per decade. The data was collected by people at home who monitored the number of flying insects splattered on their vehicle registration plates. You may be shocked to hear that the UK is ranked 189th out of 218 countries for how we look after our nature. Insects and other invertebrates are critical to healthy functioning ecosystems, of course. They pollinate most of the world's crops, they provide natural pest control, decompose organic matter and recycle nutrients into the soil. And without them, life on Earth would collapse. In my grandparents' childhoods, there were abundant wildflower meadows teeming with life, inspiring artists and poets, clouds of butterflies ascending from the flowery undergrowth. And sadly, that's something very few can now experience because these meadows have declined by an incredible 97% in the UK since the 1930s. It's worth bearing in mind that every acre of traditional flower meadow can produce 3 million flowers a day, with enough pollen to feed close to 100,000 bees. When I was a child, around 10 years old, I became transfixed by the birds in my garden. And even then, in the 60s and 70s, nature was disappearing at an alarming rate. Between 1970 and 2010, the much-loved birds of my childhood had declined by 44 million, due in large part to habitat destruction and insect declines. Land continues to disappear beneath concrete and tarmac, and our remaining countryside has been liberally doused in a toxic cocktail of insecticides, herbicides, and fungicides. The colour has been leached from the land. This extinction of experience results in even the language of nature being expunged, with words such as acorn, adder, bluebell and buttercup, cowslip and conker, and many other nature words considered to have no relevance to modern-day childhood and removed from the Oxford Junior Dictionary. But we don't have to accept this new normal of a landscape or even a townscape that is desert. This is the green space beyond my garden where I used to live. Here we see a very familiar picture, what is referred to as amenity grassland, once mowed to within an inch of its life with monotonous regularity. The only colour to be seen, the high-vis jacket of the guy with the leaf blower. These neglected or often forgotten spaces are crying out to become so much more, and I started by drifting out into this space to garden and talk to passers-by about what I was doing. And gradually people started to join in, bring plants from their gardens and make donations, and generally to offer words of encouragement and support. Once we start to fully experience the transformative power of flowers and community gardening, neighbours come together to be part of it, enjoying conversation, exercise, the joy of tending the land, and pride of place. And they wonder why they weren't doing it before. By the way, I don't want you to think that there are never objections or obstacles. But flowers have an uncanny way of winning people over. When the frequency and area of the grass cutting regime is dramatically reduced and redesigned, new possibilities arise. Money saved from the reduction of mowing can now be used to turn the space into a garden with trees, orchards, hedgerows, bulbs, flower meadows, and wildlife borders. Each location requires a thoughtful and appropriate approach. In some places, we're able to scarify the grass aggressively, creating patches of bare earth to sow flower seeds into. At other times, we need to dig more vigorously to remove the competition. Sometimes we need to take more drastic action, and turf stripping machinery allows us to establish large areas of pollinator flowers with breathtaking effect. Local groups are springing up literally everywhere, converting patches of unloved land and gardening for biodiversity. Councils are getting on board, keen to demonstrate their commitment to the ecological emergency and recognising that the public demand for ruthless tidiness is changing. Their lead encourages more change where we live and work with gardeners, community groups, businesses and schools. Every emerging seedling symbolizes an uprising of optimism. Is everything we've witnessed enough to make us reset our relationship with nature, starting with our gardens and then the spaces all around us? The ecological and climate emergencies that we face, of course, demand political and societal responses, but we can and must still sow the seeds of change in our lives, in our land, and with those around us. The relationships we build with nature and our neighbours will support us all. As we tend a garden, we start to see ourselves as integral to the ecosystem. To heal the separation, we have to rethink the notion of humans in one place and nature somewhere else, often pushed to the ever-reducing fringes. We need a mindset of shared space everywhere, particularly right here, wherever we are. Now is the time to fill our public and community spaces with pollinator-friendly flowers and wildlife habitats, rebuilding nature corridors and reintegrating human activity with the rest of the natural world. This is not just tokenism or decoration. It's a small step alongside many others who are taking that step in their own neighbourhoods, whether it's planting bulbs or trees or growing food in regenerative ways. And it's a vision of a thriving, collaborative and beautiful world which we can hold and nurture and bring to life. We are the gardeners. Thank you.